Hello, hi, welcome or welcome back to my channel. I have been tagged to do this reading preferences tag, and this was created by my sister here on YouTube. So thank you so much, sister, for tagging me in this video. I will link her video down in the description box below so that you can see her answers to her questions, and she is the original creator of this tag. Since this is a tag and I do watch a couple of book content creators, I decided to just tag one book content creator, and that is Melina from What Melina Reads here on YouTube. So Melina, you are tagged in this video. For those of you that are watching this video and would like to partake in this tag, you are also considered to be tagged in this video. So feel free to film a video or even comment down below the answers to the questions for this reading preferences tag. Without further ado, let's jump right into the video. There are 4 questions to this reading preferences tag video. I have my laptop here so that I can read the questions, and I also have some notes to some of the questions so that I stay on topic and don't go off in the tangents that I tend to do in my videos. The first question is, how do you choose the next book you read? Since I started this channel, I do have a way to choose the next book that I read, and that is using my TBR prompt jar to pick my monthly reads. So the TBR prompt jar picks 2 books for me, and then 1 book is automatically a book club pick of the month on Fable from either Jamie or Freya. I feel like a broken record saying this over and over again, but that is a confirmed book. So I get to choose between Freya's book club or Jamie's book club. That would be just 3 books that I would read in the month, or hopefully get to in the month. And on top of that, I have a seasonal TBR. So currently we are still in spring, so I do have my spring TBR. So I have a good chunk of books to pick from out of my unread library of 65 books or so. That kind of dwindles down the number of books that I can choose. And I am a huge mood reader. So sometimes I don't even get to the books on my seasonal TBR or even my monthly TBRs because I am either currently reading a book from the previous month, or I am just itching to pick up a book that's not on either of my TBRs, and I just really want to get to that book straight away. Because I have this channel, I also plan how my videos will go based on the books that I want to read. So sometimes if I am looking at my physical TBR and I have my monthly TBR and also my seasonal TBR, they're mostly my physical TBR. So I will do a physical TBR takedown. And from there, it's based on what I feel from my physical TBR of those 2 TBR piles. So that's where the mood reading comes in, where I'm kind of limited to my monthly and my seasonal TBR. And that really helps with my mood reading as well, because when I look at my unread books of, let's say, 65 books, I get kind of intimidated or overstimulated of what book to read first. So having that TBR prompt jar or even having that monthly or seasonal TBR really helps me zone into what book I'm in the mood for in that specific small little pile that I have. I'm just looking at my notes now and I already went on a tangent. I do love the method of using my TBR prompt jar to pick 2 books for the month. However, as you can see with my track record, it has not been going too well. I don't think I've successfully completed all the books on my monthly TBRs, but because of my mood reading and because I am currently in the middle of a book in between months, I do want to read the books that I'm currently in the middle of. And because of that, my monthly TBR does not get completed. Now, prior to having this channel, I would get a lot of book recommendations from YouTube, so from book content creators, and mainly on YouTube, but I get maybe 1 or 2 from Instagram or TikTok. My main source is YouTube, but I do like to look at book content on Instagram and TikTok as well. It's just I much prefer getting the book recommendations from YouTube. So prior to having this channel, I did not do a monthly TBR. I just based off of what I was feeling at the moment and what came in from the library, because I also borrow books from the library. I would say most of my books that I do read are mainly from the library or my unread books that I own. Now, I'm trying to make a conscious effort of buying less books, because whenever I do buy a lot of books and then when I get to the books, but I'm not really loving it that much, I would donate them or resell them. But mostly donate them. But because I don't want to own a book that I don't particularly love and want to see on my shelves, I don't want to deal with the hassle of donating or reselling the books. When I'm not sure whether I'm going to enjoy the book, I would just borrow it from the library. And I do not mind placing a hold on the library because by the time the book comes in, I'm already reading one of my physical TBRs, and the book would come in, and actually multiple books would come in, and then I would have to push my physical TBR to the side. So I still have to juggle how to manage reading my library books and my physical TBR. But so far for the library books, when it is ready for pickup, I sometimes cancel the hold and re-hold them again if I am not ready to read the book yet, because I know I am not in the mood for it. So why am I going to pick up the book and give it an unfair rating based on my mood? With that being said, I do not mind canceling the hold and staying on hold again. And sometimes the hold is 100 people in front of me. And with that, I do not mind getting to it by the time it comes. I'm not really that eager to pick it up, but I know I want to read that book. I think I went on a tangent again. Back to the book recommendations. I would get book recommendations from book content creators or through people I'm closest to. That is just what is on my TBR, and once I have a selection of books. So once I have a selection of books to choose from, I would either see if it's on my physical TBR, but if it's not something that I have owned, I would go through the library. One trick that I have been doing this year is that with new releases, I see that there are multiple holds on new releases or viral books. So when it comes to a new release, I would check on when the book release date is going to be. And then I would check with my library to see whether this book is on order. And if it is, I place a hold. In terms of new releases, at least my anticipated new releases, I've been pretty good at being one of the first few to get the book. However, because there's so many books from the library that I place on hold, they come pretty much all at once. So I currently have 2 books checked out, but I am currently in the middle of 3 books that I'm reading, and I have my physical TBR. So you can already hear that there's just so many books that I have to choose from. That is something that I need to work on, and I guess that's where my mood reading kicks in. Now, in terms of a new release that I was not anticipating, those books tend to be hundreds of people in front of me. And let's say I need to get to it by this month because it is a book club pick of the month. I would go on Libby, and that connects to my Toronto Public Library. Whereas my physical copies of the new releases that I get, those are from the Ottawa Public Library. So on my Toronto Public Library, I would place holds on the Libby app. And sometimes, if I'm lucky, I get the skip the line borrowing. So that means that I have 7 days to finish that book. So I am hoping that one of the books that I need for this month, which is Yesteryear by Caro Claire Burke, I think that's the author. I hope I get the skip the line because that is May's book of the month on Jamie's Fable book club. Long story short, how do I choose the next book that I read? It's mainly based on my mood, and it's kind of condensed into smaller piles. That is the first question. I feel like that was quite long for that first question. Now, for the second question, what format or genre do you prefer? So let's talk about the format first. In terms of the format, I enjoy both physical and ebook equally. So prior to my Kobo, I much prefer a physical copy because I used to read from my iPhone, and the screen was just so small and I just did not have an enjoyable experience. But once I got my Kobo, that really changed the game there. However, they do have their pros and cons. So let's talk about a physical book first. I really enjoy the action of flipping a page and holding a physical copy in my hands. Of course, I love the smell of books. So just that whole experience is just so enjoyable to me. And when I'm holding that physical book and I'm sitting on this couch with this lamp on and I'm just reading, it's just bringing that cozy vibe. So I really enjoy a physical copy of a book. Now, the only drawback to a physical copy of a book is that it is not that portable. If I want to bring multiple books on the go, I really cannot because it takes up too much space. And that's where an ebook comes in, especially reading at night in bed. I do prefer reading an ebook because my fingers do get cold at night. So holding that physical copy outside of my blankets gets a bit cold and I just don't like that. So having an ebook where I can just get myself tucked in further into my blankets without the hassle of sitting or having cold hands while reading a book. Now back to a physical copy of a book. I do prefer a paperback over a hardcover, mainly because of the functionality and portability of the book. When it comes to a hardcover, I do appreciate the dust jacket, the embossing of the hardcover, and just the art that we get, the illustrations that we get with a hardcover. However, I find that I am okay with not having a hardcover because it's not as functional to read, and I would take off the dust jacket and then it's just a hardback. I have to use two hands. I can't really read with one hand. My hands are quite small. And in terms of the cost, it is cheaper than a hardcover. Now, I could go on Book Outlet and purchase a hardcover for a fraction of a price, but I still prefer a paperback due to its functionality and portability. However, I would not stray away from hardcovers if it only has a hardcover of that book. And if it is a limited edition, why not? Because it is beautiful. So I do love seeing limited edition books. However, I do not collect limited edition books. If I can get my hands on it, that's great, but I don't really have that need to collect limited edition copies of a book. So whatever copy I have, I just want one copy of a book. My ranking for a physical copy is paperback, hardcover, and then my least favorite is actually mass paperback because although it is nice, tiny, compact, it's portable. However, I find that it's not that enjoyable to read because the spacing between the lines are just too compact. My eyes doesn't feel that comfortable reading it, so it's just too crammed for my eyes. So I do prefer my lines to be spaced pretty evenly and nicely. I like the spaces to be a certain way. Now, I also enjoy a good audiobook only when I am cleaning the condo. I have tested this out. I have listened through an audiobook while walking to the grocery store, and I find that to be the least enjoyable because I noticed that while walking to the grocery store, I just really can't hear that well because of all the outside noise around me. And also when I'm at the grocery store, when I am going grocery shopping, I tend to zone out because I'm thinking of what I need to pick up or thinking whether I should pick up certain items from the grocery store. So I tend to zone out quite often during that whole process. I find myself not leaning towards an audiobook and instead maybe listening to a YouTube video or even a podcast or music. I love listening to an audiobook when I am cleaning around the condo because I really am not thinking much. It's really great for me to immerse myself into an audiobook when I'm cleaning the condo because I'm just wiping and cleaning and dusting and doing all that sort of things. I sometimes enjoy listening to an audiobook when I am cooking and or eating. When it comes to cooking, if it's a recipe I am very familiar with, I love listening to an audiobook. But if it's a new recipe, I tend to not listen to an audiobook because I will tend to zone out. And then when it comes to eating, sometimes I'm in a mood to listen to an audiobook, but I like to watch YouTube videos during that time. So that covers the format that I prefer. Now, in terms of the genre I prefer, my favorite genre has got to be fantasy because I love exploring and diving into a new fictional world. The act of being transported into that fictional world is what I enjoy of fantasy the most. I feel like maybe sci-fi could do the same thing, but we'll see. I haven't really dabbled in sci-fi, so I'm curious to see whether that's also going to give that same effect to me. So maybe, maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. Now, as I read more fantasy, I realize that I am getting quite picky with the fantasy books that I read. More specifically, I am talking about romances. So when it comes to a romancy, I would like my romance in my fantasy novels to not be so prevalent. And if the romance is really there, I want the tension and the yearning between the characters. I would say out of all the romances that I have read, I think my favorite has got to be the Shepherd King duology, especially the second book, because that's where the romance is more prevalent. There's little sprinkles of romance in the first book. And then when it came to the second book, we saw the romance blossom. And that's what I really enjoyed because I wanted that slow burn, that tension to really build so that I can feel it as well. Another book that comes to mind is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. There was a lot of romance in it. Although I don't mind romance, I just did not care for their romance. I didn't really feel the tension or the yearning between the two characters. And if it was, it didn't hit me. So in the last 2 years, I've been enjoying reading contemporary romance. One author that comes to mind is Abby Jimenez. I love her books. I have read Part of Your World, Yours Truly, Just for the Summer, Say You'll Remember Me, and I am currently reading The Night We Met. So I haven't read her first 3. I think it's Friend Zone, The Happy Ever After Playlist, and Life is Too Short. I think that's the 3, and her novellas. With the 4 books I've completed and the 1 book I am currently reading, I have been enjoying her books, and she has this way for me to just keep reading. I think it might just be the short chapters. I'm not sure. And it's just her writing just captivates me. I don't know why. I just keep flipping through the pages. I don't really see myself stopping that much. I kind of have to force myself to stop. She really changed the game for me in terms of contemporary romance. And another author that has changed the game for me is B.K. Borison. I love how cute the romance is in her books. I read Good Spirits. That is my first B.K. Borison book, and I absolutely loved it. It was so cute. The romance was adorable. The story was cute. I also read First Time Caller and Now Back to You by B.K. Borison, and I love them both equally. So I love the romance. I love the banter. Very cute. They changed the game for contemporary romance. However, because I am slowly diving into contemporary romance, I am quite picky with the contemporary romances that I pick. In terms of thrillers, my first thriller novel was The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I think that's how you say his name, Michaelides. I could be completely wrong, but that was my first thriller and my favorite thriller because I have read other thrillers afterwards and they don't hit as hard as The Silent Patient for me. I don't get that jaw-dropping feeling that I did with The Silent Patient. I didn't feel that thrill in a thriller. The other book I'm thinking of is Rock, Paper, Scissors. I did enjoy Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney, but the plot twist wasn't really something that made my jaw drop. But because it really freaked me out at the last 50 pages. There was something that happened that freaked me out and I was literally scared. I would love a thriller that can actually get me scared and also keep me on my toes. So it's not hard for me to get scared. I am the biggest scaredy cat. So for a book to scare me, I find that it should be a given. I want that thrill. I want that scare factor. Maybe not a scare factor. I want that thrill factor in a thriller. So there's only 2 books that has gotten me to that thrill factor out of all the thrillers that I have read. So because I am dabbling in these genres, if you have any recommendations in terms of romance or thriller novels, please do leave some recommendations down in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts on your favorite romance or thrillers, and I would love to check them out if I haven't already done so. So those are the genres I prefer. However, I do want to branch out in terms of my reading tastes and branch out to different genres. For instance, historical fiction, literary fiction, sci-fi, and along with reading nonfiction and classics. That is question 2. I feel like that was a long answer to that question as well. A long story short for that one, the format I prefer is physical or ebook. They're just equal to me. In terms of the genres, I prefer fantasy, romance, and thriller. For question 3, when, where, or how do you read? I kind of read sporadically. So if I can wake up early on a weekday, I would squeeze in an hour of reading, depending on if I can wake up early. If I cannot, then I don't have a morning reading session. I try to read in the afternoon, so during my lunch break, only if I am not distracted by work. So sometimes I might be thinking about work. So when I'm trying to read a book, I just zone out because I'm just thinking about work. So sometimes I feel like reading a book doesn't really get me out of thinking about work. It's YouTube videos that do, or TikTok. So I would gravitate towards that. But if I feel like work is not on my mind, then I would pick up a book and read. That's probably 30 minutes there. And then in the evening, if I am not too tired and I want to squeeze in a little bit of reading at night, I would read maybe another hour in bed. So that is how I read. And when I read, if I can wake up early in the morning, I like to read a physical copy of a book because that sets that slow morning vibes that I'm looking for. And in the evening, when I am in bed, I would pick up my e-reader to read my book. So those are how I would read. And in the afternoon, maybe an audiobook because I would be cooking and eating my lunch. So I'll be listening to an audiobook. So those are, I guess, 3 formats that I kind of read and how I read in a day. It's based on whether I am in the mood to read it as well. So whether I can wake up in time if I'm not too sleepy at night or I'm not thinking about work during my lunch break. So depending on those factors, I will be reading. That's when and how and where I read. I literally read anywhere in the condo if I'm listening to an audiobook. When it comes to a physical book, I like to read on this sofa, as you can see. And if you've seen my reading vlogs, you are very familiar with this couch here. And then in bed, I would sometimes pick up a physical copy of a book, maybe, depending on whether my hands are cold or not. Or I would pick up my e-reader. So my e-reader is mainly when I'm on the go. If I don't have a physical copy of the book and I only have the ebook copy, but if I have the physical copy, I would gravitate towards that physical copy. And then depending on when and where I am in the condo, I would pick up the physical copy or an ebook. That is when, where, and how I read. And finally, the fourth question is, do you or how do you keep track of the books you read? So I do keep track of the books that I read. Let's talk about the apps that I use to track the books that I read. So the first one is a long time running app that I've been using ever since I started picking up reading again in 2020, and that is Goodreads. I feel like everyone's familiar with Goodreads. I do want to branch out of Goodreads, but because I have so much data there and I'm just so used to having Goodreads, I just want to keep the Goodreads. And the second app that I use is Fable. I absolutely love this app. This is where I participate in Freya or Jamie's book club picks of the month. It's through their Fable book club. That's one of my favorite features on the app. And what I love about Fable is that it gives you different kinds of stats. One thing I really love is the unique reader summary. So it kind of has a smart summary and that kind of describes what kind of reader you are based on the books that you've read. And then you can, of course, do a reading goal. You also have your most read genre section, which is really cool. And as you can see, I have fantasy there, which is no shock. There's just so much stats that you have here. You have your average rating and then favorite authors or authors that you mostly read from. It's just lots of great stats here. I love that part about Fable as well. But of course, my favorite part is the book club pick. And you can also build a habit with streaks. So I used to do this with my 2025 reading journal, but because I am making a habit of actually pressing the I have read today so that I can build my streaks for the books that I read. So I don't really need that spread that I had in my 2025 reading journal. So I can just go through Fable and see what books I've read that month and how long it took me to read the book based on whether I pressed that button or not. You could import your Goodreads into here, but I didn't because I wanted to start fresh with this app. Now, those are the two apps that I use to track my reading. I don't really write reviews on the apps, but I keep that on my reading journal. So another way for me to track the books that I read is through my reading journal. And so far, I have been loving it. I have finally written my full review on one book in my reading journal. And I love doing this because I can look back to it and reflect on the book so that when I film my reading wrap up at the end of each month, I can refer to it and see if I am saying everything that I wanted to say in the videos. I haven't been doing that. I've been winging it for the time being because I have not fully written my reviews. But because I film my reading vlogs that are real-time thoughts, if I am not filming my reading vlogs, I do write my thoughts in the notes app on my iPhone. So I have that real-time thoughts somewhere so that when I do my full review of the book, I have something to refer to and kind of remember how I felt about the book at that moment. So those are the 4 questions to this reading preferences tag video. I think this is a lot longer than I anticipated. So if you have stayed till the end, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you got some of my reading preferences based on my answers, or maybe I over-explained at some points. And if you would like to partake in this reading tag, feel free to either film or comment down below your answers to the questions. And with that being said, I will see you all in the next video. Bye!